You can't last a bridge against me. Human alien warrior queen didn't know who she was up against, Commander. Sarah Chen stood perfectly still in the massive throne room. The walls around her were made of black stone that seemed to eat light. Strange symbols glowed red along the ceiling, casting dancing shadows across the floor. The air smelled of metal and something sharp that made her nose tingle. In front of her sat the most dangerous being she had ever seen, Vexthara, the Crimson. Warrior queen of the Zephyrian Empire, looked like a nightmare come to life. She was 9 feet tall, with 4 powerful arms that ended in claws sharp enough to cut steel. Her skin was dark red with black stripes, and metal parts had been fused into her body. Tubes and wires ran along her arms and neck, glowing with blue energy. The queen's face was the worst part. Her mouth had 4 parts that opened like a flower, showing rows of needle teeth. Her eyes were solid black, with no white parts at all. When she looked at Sarah, it felt like being stared at by death itself. So, the queen said, her voice like grinding metal, "This is what humans send to speak with me, a small, weak thing with soft skin and tiny teeth." Sarah kept her face calm. She had learned long ago not to show fear, even when her heart was beating fast. Round the throne room, dozens of alien warriors watched her. Some had extra arms like their queen. Others had spikes growing from their backs or glowing eyes. All of them looked like they wanted to tear her apart. "Your Majesty," Sarah said with a small bow, "I come here to speak about trade between our people. Humans have much to offer the Zephyrian Empire." Vexthara as mandibles clicked together, making a sound like breaking bones. "Trade with your pathetic species. You have nothing we want. Human, your people are weak. You have no claws, no natural armor, no enhanced strength. You are prey animals pretending to be predators." The alien warriors around the room laughed. The sound was horrible, like metal scraping against stone. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "Perhaps your Majesty does not know much about humans. We are stronger than we look." Stronger? The queen stood up from her throne. Even sitting, she had been tall. Standing, she looked like a tower of muscle and metal. "I have conquered 47 species, little human. I have broken the will of entire worlds. Your kind sends farmers and traders to space. You avoid conflict. You seek peace." She spat the last word like it tasted bad. "We do seek peace," Sarah agreed. "But that does not make us weak." Vexthara walked down the steps from her throne. Her 4 arms moved like a dancer's, graceful despite their size. When she reached Sarah, she leaned down until their faces were inches apart. Sarah could smell the queen's breath, sharp and metallic. 3 months ago, the queen whispered, "I received reports about your species." "Do you know what they said?" Sarah waited. "They said humans are soft, that you cry when you are hurt, that you care more about saving lives than winning battles, that you would rather run than fight." The queen's black eyes studied Sarah's face. "Is this true?" "Some of it is true," Sarah said simply. The aliens in the room laughed louder. Several made comments in their own language that Sarah did not understand, but the meaning was clear enough. Vexthara smiled, showing all her sharp teeth. "At least you are honest. Most species lie to me about their strength. They pretend to be warriors when they are really cowards." "Your Majesty," Sarah said, "may I ask you something?" The queen's eyes narrowed. "Speak. How many of those 47 species did you defeat in fair combat?" The laughter stopped. The room became very quiet. "What did you say?" Vexthara's voice was dangerous now. "I mean no disrespect," Sarah continued, "but I studied your empire's history before coming here. Most of those species were already fighting each other when you arrived. You attacked when they were weak and divided. That is smart tactics, but it is not the same as defeating a united enemy." Several alien warriors moved forward, but the queen held up one hand to stop them. "You dare question my victories?" "I question nothing," Sarah said. "I simply point out that humans are different. We are not divided. We do not fight among ourselves when faced with a common threat. When someone attacks humanity, they face all of humanity." Vexthara laughed, but it sounded forced. "Your tiny species against the might of my empire. You will last perhaps a day, perhaps." Sarah said, But what if you were wrong? The queen stared at her for a long moment. Then she began to pace around Sarah like a predator circling prey. You interest me, little human. Most species beg for mercy by now. They offer me treasure or slaves. But you stand there, calm as still water, and suggest that I might be wrong about your people. I suggest that you might not have all the information, Sarah corrected gently. Information? Vexthar stopped pacing. What information could possibly matter? I have seen your military reports. Your weapons are simple projectile throwers and chemical explosives. Your ships are slow. Your soldiers wear basic armor. What could you possibly know that I do not? Sarah looked around the throne room. She counted exits, guard positions, and weapon placements, old habits from her military training. Your Majesty, she said finally, I propose a challenge. The room became silent again. This time, the silence felt different, dangerous. A challenge? The Queen's voice was very soft now. You challenge me? I challenge the assumption that humans are weak. Give me 3 trials. Any 3 trials you choose. If I fail any of them, humanity will accept that we are not worthy of your attention. We will leave this sector of space and never return. And if you succeed in all 3, then you will agree to meet with our diplomats and discuss trade as equals. Vexthara was very still for a moment. Then she threw back her head and laughed. This time, the laughter was real. It echoed off the walls like thunder. Oh, little human, she said when she could speak again. You have no idea what you have just asked for. My trials have broken species that could tear you apart with their bare hands. Warriors who could crush your skull between their fingers have begged me for mercy before the first trial was half finished. I understand, Sarah said. Do you? The Queen leaned close again. The last being who challenged me was a Korthic battle lord. He was 12 feet tall, covered in natural armor, and had acid for blood. Do you know what happened to him? Sarah waited. He lasted exactly 18 minutes in the first trial. Before he broke completely, his mind shattered like glass. He spent his remaining days drawing pictures of flowers and crying like a child. That sounds terrible. Sarah said, I am sorry that happened to him. Vexthar studied Sarah's face carefully. You are not afraid. I am afraid, Sarah admitted. But I am here anyway. The Queen was quiet for a long time, round the room. Her warriors waited for her decision. Finally, Vexthar smiled again. This time, the smile was different, more thoughtful. Very well, human. I accept your challenge. 3 trials of my choosing. You will have no help, no special equipment, and no mercy. When you fail, your species will know the price of arrogance. When do we begin? Sarah asked. At dawn tomorrow. Tonight, you will be my guest. The Queen gestured to 2 guards. Escort Commander Chen to the guest's quarters. Give her whatever she needs. Tomorrow, we see what humans are really made of. As the guards led her away, Sarah heard the Queen speaking to her advisors in their own language. She could not understand the words, but she recognized the tone. It was the voice of someone planning a hunt. Sarah smiled to herself. Vexthar thought she was the hunter. The Queen was about to learn that sometimes the prey hunted back. The red sun was just coming up when Sarah stepped onto the transport ship that would take her to the Thornlands. Through the small window, she could see the jungle moon hanging in space. Like a bloody eye, the entire surface was covered in thick, dark vegetation that moved even when there was no wind. Vexthar stood beside her, looking confident and relaxed. The Queen had changed into hunting gear, a sleek black suit that covered her body, but left her for arms free to move. Strange devices were attached to her wrists and neck, glowing softly with blue light. The Thornlands, the Queen said, watching Sarah's face for signs of fear. 43 species have tried to survive there. 39 died within the first hour. The other 4, she smiled, showing her sharp teeth. They begged me to end their suffering. Sarah nodded, studying the moon's surface. What kinds of dangers should I expect? Everything wants to kill you there, Vexthar replied cheerfully. The plants have thorns that inject poison. The ground can open up and swallow you whole. There are creatures that hunt by sound, others that track by smell, and some that can see heat from your body. The air itself will start to burn your lungs after a few hours. Sounds challenging. Sarah said calmly. The queen laughed. You will have exactly 1 hour before I begin hunting you. Use that time wisely, little human. Find a place to hide, perhaps. Pray to whatever gods your species believes in. Try to make peace with your coming death. The ship landed with a soft thud. The doors opened, and immediately Sarah could smell the jungle, thick, wet, and full of rot. The air was so heavy it felt like breathing soup. Strange sounds echoed from the dark trees, howls, clicks, and scratching noises that made her skin crawl. 1 hour, Vexthar reminded her as Sarah stepped off the ship. Then I come for you. Sarah looked around quickly. The jungle was even worse up close. The trees were twisted and black, with branches that moved like arms reaching for her, red. Moss covered everything, glowing faintly in the dim light. The ground was soft and wet, making a squelching sound under her boots. She had brought only basic survival gear, a knife, some rope, a small medical kit, and a water bottle. Nothing that would help her fight a 9-foot alien warrior with enhanced strength and speed. But Sarah had something Vexthara did not expect. She had 20 years of military training, 3 years surviving the siege of Titan Colony, and the stubborn human refusal to give up. The moment the ship's doors closed, Sarah started moving, but instead of running deeper into the jungle to hide, she began studying everything around her. She touched the bark of trees, tested the strength of hanging vines, and carefully examined the strange plants. The thorns that Vexthar had mentioned were everywhere. They grew on twisted vines that hung between the trees like natural wire. Sarah noticed that they moved toward warmth when she held her hand near them. They turned to follow the heat. Interesting. She found a patch of the glowing moss and carefully scraped some into her water bottle. When she shook it, the moss glowed brighter. When she stopped shaking, it faded. Very interesting. Near a fallen tree, she discovered something that made her smile. A cluster of round pods that hung from thin stems. When she touched one gently, it exploded with a loud pop, releasing a cloud of silver dust that made her eyes water. Perfect. Sarah worked quickly and quietly. She cut sections of the heat-seeking thorns and carefully positioned them along what looked like animal trails through the jungle. She collected more of the exploding pods and set them up like an early warning system. She gathered the glowing moss and made patterns with it that would confuse anyone trying to track her. Then she found what she was really looking for, a stream that ran through a narrow valley between two hills. The water was dark and moved slowly, but it was deep enough for what she needed. Sarah began to prepare her trap, exactly 1 hour after the ship left. She heard Vexthara's voice echoing through the jungle. Time is up, little human. The hunt begins now. The queen's voice came from the landing area, about 2 miles away. Sarah smiled grimly and put the finishing touches on her work. For the first 30 minutes, Sarah could hear Vexthara moving confidently through the jungle. The alien queen was fast and strong, crashing through bushes and leaping over fallen trees. She was following Sarah's scent trail easily, too easily. Then the first explosion pod went off. The sound echoed through the trees, a sharp crack followed by Vexthara's angry roar. Sarah had led the queen's path directly through a cluster of the pods. The silver dust would irritate her eyes and nose, making it harder to track by smell. Clever. Vexthara's voice called out, but tricks will not save you for long. The queen kept coming, but now she was moving more carefully. Sarah could hear her testing each step, avoiding the obvious traps. That was when the second part of Sarah's plan kicked in. The heat-seeking thorns that Sarah had repositioned were not meant to hurt Vexthara directly. They were meant to react to her body heat and move, creating sounds and movements that would draw her attention in the wrong directions. For an hour, the sounds of Vexthara's hunt grew more and more frustrated. She would rush toward what she thought was Sarah's position, only to find moving thorns and empty air. The glowing moss patterns Sarah had created made false trails that led in circles. Stop running and face me, the queen shouted. Her voice sounded angry now, not confident. Sarah was not running. She was exactly where she had been for the last hour, hiding in the dark water of the stream, breathing through a hollow reed, waiting. Finally, she heard what she had been waiting for. Vexthara was getting tired. The alien queen's breathing was heavier, and her movements were less controlled. She was following the real scent trail now, the one Sarah had left leading to the stream. Sarah heard the queen approach the water's edge. Through her reed, she could hear Vexthara's confused voice. "The trail ends here," the queen muttered. "But there is nowhere to go. The stream is too shallow to hide in, and the banks are too steep to climb quickly." Sarah smiled underwater. That was exactly what she had wanted Vexthara to think. The queen stood at the edge of the water for several minutes, looking around carefully. Finally, she stepped into the stream to cross to the other side. That was when Sarah struck. She erupted from the water behind Vexthara like a nightmare. The alien queen spun around, but Sarah was already moving. She had tied one end of her rope to a heavy rock upstream. As the water flowed past, it had created a perfect snare. Sarah yanked hard on the rope. The rock swung down from where she had hidden it in the branches overhead, and the rope wrapped around Vexthara's legs. The mighty warrior queen, who had conquered 47 species, tumbled face first into the muddy water. Before Vexthara could recover, Sarah was on the bank, holding the other end of the rope. The queen thrashed in the water, trying to cut the rope with her claws, but Sarah had positioned herself where the alien could not reach her. "Lesson 1, Sarah called out, her voice calm and steady. "Humans don't just survive. We adapt." Vexthara finally managed to cut through the rope and stood up in the stream. Water and mud dripped from her body. Her black eyes burned with fury. But there was something else there too. Surprise. "You did not run," the queen said slowly. "No," Sarah agreed. "I waited. You used my own strength against me, yes?" Vexthara climbed out of the stream and faced Sarah. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then, to Sarah's surprise, the alien queen smiled. Not the cruel smile she had shown before, but something different. Something that looked almost like respect. "The first trial is over," Vexthara announced. "You have a past." Sarah nodded. "What's the second trial?" The queen's smile grew wider. "Oh, little human, you are going to hate the second trial." But as they walked back toward the pickup point, Sarah noticed that Vexthara was looking at her differently now. The queen was no longer looking at prey. She was looking at a hunter. 2 days after the hunt in the Thornlands, Sarah stood at the entrance to the most feared place in the Zephyrian Empire. The gauntlet of blades stretched out before her like a nightmare. Made of metal and light, the arena was huge, easily the size of 3 football fields. The floor was made of dark metal that reflected the strange lights hanging from the ceiling. Scattered across the arena were dozens of different machines, each one designed to test a warrior's speed, strength, and will to survive. Vexthara sat in her royal viewing box high above the arena floor. She was no longer alone. Word of the human's success in the Thornlands had spread quickly through the Empire. Hundreds of alien spectators filled the seats around her, all eager to watch the small human fail. "The gauntlet is 10 waves." Vexthara's voice echoed through speakers around the arena. "Each wave is more dangerous than the last. No alien has ever completed more than 7 waves. Most do not survive past the 4th. Sarah looked up at the viewing box, even from this distance. She could see the queen's black eyes watching her carefully. "The record," Vexthara continued, "is held by a Krathri war beast. It stood 12 feet tall, had armor-plated skin, and could lift a transport vehicle with its bare hands. It reached wave 7 before the machines tore it apart, round the arena. The alien spectators cheered and made betting sounds. Sarah noticed that none of them seemed to be betting on her survival. Each wave lasts exactly 10 minutes. The queen explained, "You must survive the full 10 minutes before moving to the next wave. If you are injured badly enough that you cannot continue, the trial ends. If you ask for mercy, the trial ends. If you die," Vexthara paused. "Well, that also ends the trial." Sarah nodded and stepped forward onto the arena floor. The metal felt strange under her feet, warm and slightly soft, like it was alive. "Begin wave 1." Vexthar announced. Immediately, the arena came alive with sound and movement. Sections of the floor started spinning like giant wheels. Metal arms swung down from the ceiling, trying to knock Sarah off her feet. Spinning blades emerged from the walls, moving back and forth in deadly patterns. But Sarah did not panic. Instead, she stood perfectly still and watched. For the first minute of Wave 1, she simply observed. She counted the timing of each spinning blade. She watched how the metal arms moved. She studied the pattern of the spinning floor sections. The alien crowd began to laugh. They thought the human was frozen with fear. Then Sarah started to move. She did not try to run past the dangers or fight them. Instead, she began to dance between them. When a metal arm swung down, she was already moving to where it could not reach her. When the floor spun, she used its movement to carry her forward faster than she could run. Wave 1 ended. Sarah was not even breathing hard. Interesting. Vexthar muttered from her box. Wave 2 brought new challenges. Energy beams shot across the arena in random patterns. Gravity fields tried to pull Sarah toward crushing machines. Sonic blasters filled the air with sounds so loud they could shatter bones. Again, Sarah watched and learned. She noticed that the energy beams followed specific paths. Even though they seemed random, she realized that the gravity fields were actually predictable. They followed a pattern based on where she was standing. Most importantly, she noticed something the arena's designers had not intended. The different machines sometimes interfered with each other. In Wave 3, Sarah started to test her theory. When a gravity field tried to pull her toward a crushing machine, she let it pull her halfway, then used her momentum to swing around a support pole. The gravity field ended up pulling a metal arm into the crushing machine instead. The crowd grew quieter. Wave 4 brought missile launchers and plasma cannons. These weapons were fast and deadly, designed to destroy anything they hit. But Sarah had been watching for 3 waves now. She knew exactly how each machine worked. She began running in a specific pattern, leading the missiles to impact points where they would damage other machines. A plasma cannon fired at her, missed, and destroyed a barrier generator instead. Without the barrier, Sarah could reach a control panel that shut down to more machines. By Wave 5, even Vexthar was leaning forward in her seat. Sarah was not just surviving the gauntlet, she was dismantling it. Wave 6 introduced war drones, flying machines armed with energy weapons. And programmed to hunt down anything that moved, they were fast, smart, and deadly. Sarah waited until 3 drones were chasing her in a straight line. Then she dove and rolled under a low barrier. The drones, flying too fast to stop, crashed into each other in a spectacular explosion. The remaining drones spread out to attack her from different directions. But Sarah had noticed something important. Their energy weapons were powerful enough to damage the arena's own systems. She positioned herself so that when the drones fired at her, their beams hit the control systems for the next wave instead, machines that should have activated. In Wave 7 started smoking and sparking. Wave 7 was supposed to be the wave that stopped her. Massive war machines rolled out onto the arena floor, metal monsters the size of trucks, armed with every weapon the Zephyrians had ever invented. But half of them did not work because Sarah had tricked the drones into damaging their control systems. The ones that did work, Sarah turned against each other. She led one war machine into the path of another's weapons. She used the arena's own gravity fields to send machines crashing into each other. The alien crowd was completely silent now. Wave 8 brought the arena's ultimate challenge, a single massive machine called the Arena Lord. It was as big as a building, with dozens of weapons and armor thick enough to stop tank shells. Sarah looked up at the mechanical monster and smiled. She had been studying the arena's power systems for 7 waves. She knew exactly where the main energy conduits were located, and she had been carrying something in her pocket since the trial began, a small metal tool from her survival kit, while the Arena Lord powered up its weapons. Sarah sprinted to a maintenance panel that most people would never notice. She jammed her tool into the power coupling and twisted hard. The entire arena's power grid fluctuated. For just 3 seconds, everything shut down. 3 seconds was enough. When the power came back, the Arena Lord tried to restart, but its systems were confused. It began firing at random targets, including the arena's own walls and ceiling. Sarah stayed close to the machine's feet, where its weapons could not target her, and waited. The Arena Lord destroyed itself in less than 2 minutes. Wave 9 never came. The arena's computer systems, damaged by the Arena Lord's wild firing, could not activate the next wave. Wave 10, Vexthara's voice announced. But she sounded strange now. Final wave. Nothing happened. The arena was too damaged to continue. Sarah stood in the center of the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of machines that had destroyed countless warriors before her. She looked up at the viewing box where Vexthara sat. I believe. Sarah called out, that counts as completing all. 10 waves. The silence in the arena was complete. Then, slowly, one alien in the crowd began to clap. Then another. Then more. Soon the entire arena was filled with the sound of alien applause. Vexthara stood up in her box. Her forearms were crossed, and her black eyes were fixed on Sarah. The second trial, she announced, is complete. As Sarah walked toward the exit, she heard the Queen's voice one more time. Quieter now, meant only for her. Tomorrow, human, we test your mind. Sarah nodded. She was ready. The chamber for the final trial was unlike anything Sarah had seen before. The walls were made of smooth crystal that seemed to glow from within. Strange machines hummed quietly in the corners, their lights pulsing like heartbeats. The air itself felt different here, thick with an energy that made her skin tingle. In the center of the room sat 2 chairs facing each other. They looked like throne seats, but covered in wires and glowing tubes. Above each chair hung a metal helmet connected to dozens of cables. Vexthara was already in the room when Sarah arrived. The Queen stood beside one of the chairs, running her clawed fingers along its surface. She looked different today, calmer, but also more dangerous, like a storm that was building quietly before it struck. The mind meld, Vexthara said without looking up. This is how we will conduct the final trial. Sarah approached the other chair carefully. What exactly does a mind meld do? It connects our thoughts directly, the Queen explained. Our minds will touch. I will be able to see your memories, your fears, your weaknesses, and you will see mine. She finally looked at Sarah, her black eyes reflecting the crystal walls. The last being who tried this with me spent 3 days screaming before his mind broke completely. What are the rules? Sarah asked. Vexthara smiled, but it was not a happy smile. There are no rules. We connect our minds until one of us surrenders or breaks, usually. It takes me less than 5 minutes to destroy an enemy's will completely. Sarah nodded and sat down in her chair. The metal was cold against her back. And if I win? You will not win, the Queen said simply. My mind has been enhanced with cybernetic implants for over 200 years. I have memories of conquest, of power, of the fear in my enemy's eyes. Your mind is soft, untrained, full of human weakness. The Queen sat in her own chair and placed the metal helmet on her head. Immediately, the machines around the room began humming louder. Lights flashed across the walls in complex patterns. Last chance to surrender, little human, Vexthara said. Once we begin, I cannot stop what will happen to your mind. Sarah picked up her helmet. It was heavier than she expected and warm to the touch. I understand. She put the helmet on her head. The world exploded into light and pain. Suddenly, Sarah was not in the crystal chamber anymore. She was standing in a place that existed only in thought, a dark space filled with swirling colors and strange sounds. In front of her stood Vexthara, but the Queen looked different here, larger, more terrible. Her forearms moved like weapons, and her eyes burned with fire. Welcome to the battlefield of minds, Vexthara's voice echoed from everywhere at once. Here, I am supreme. Here, I will show you what fear really means. The attack came immediately. Images flooded Sarah's mind, visions of humanity's failures, their wars, their capacity for cruelty. She saw battles where humans fought each other over resources. She saw cities burning, people crying, children afraid. Every dark moment in human history crashed into her consciousness like a wave. Vexthara's mental voice was filled with satisfaction. This is what your species truly is: violent, selfish, weak. You pretend to be noble, but you are animals pretending to be civilized. The images kept coming, each one worse than the last. Sarah felt herself being pushed backward by the force of them. This was the Queen's strategy: overwhelm her victim with despair until their minds simply gave up. But Sarah did not give up. Instead, she began to remember. For every image of human failure that Vexthara showed her, Sarah found a memory of someone who stood up to fight. For every act of cruelty, she remembered countless acts of kindness. For every moment of despair, she found hope. The Queen showed her a war. Sarah showed her the medics who ran into danger to save lives. The Queen showed her poverty and hunger. Sarah showed her the people who shared their last piece of food with strangers. The Queen showed her fear and hatred. Sarah showed her the humans who chose love instead. Slowly, the tide of the mental battle began to change. What are you doing? Vexthara's voice was confused now, not confident. I am showing you the truth, Sarah replied. Yes, humans have done terrible things, but we have also done beautiful things. We choose, every day, to be better than we were the day before. Sarah began to push back with her own memories. But these were not memories of conquest or power. They were memories of connection. She showed Vexthara a mother working 3 jobs to send her child to school, never complaining, always hoping for a better future. She showed her soldiers carrying wounded enemies to safety, even when they could have left them to die. She showed her strangers donating parts of their own bodies to save people they had never met. She showed her teachers spending their own money to buy supplies for their students. She showed her rescue workers running toward disasters when everyone else was running away. The Queen's mental form began to flicker. Stop, she whispered. These images, they are too intense. But Sarah was just getting started. She showed Vexthara the most dangerous human trait of all: hope in the face of impossible odds. A scientist working for decades to cure a disease, never knowing if she would succeed. A man planting trees he would never see grow to full size, because future generations would need them. A woman adopting children who had been abandoned, giving them love they had never known. People choosing to help others even when it costs them everything. People refusing to give up even when all logic said they should. People finding light in the darkest places and sharing it with everyone around them. Stop. Vexthara's voice was desperate now. I cannot. These emotions are too strong. The Queen's enhanced mind, built for conquest and domination, was not prepared for the sheer intensity of human emotional range. Every cybernetic implant that made her stronger in battle made her more vulnerable to the flood of compassion, sacrifice, and hope that Sarah was sharing. Vexthara tried to retreat from the mental link, but Sarah's consciousness followed her. You wanted to see what humans really are, Sarah said gently. Let me show you our greatest strength. She shared her final memory, the moment she had volunteered for this mission. Sarah had not been ordered to come here. She had not been forced to risk her life facing Vexthara. She had chosen to come, knowing she would probably die, because she believed that understanding between species was possible. She had looked at the reports about the Zephyrian Empire. She had seen their history of conquest and domination, and instead of seeing enemies, she had seen people who had never learned that there was another way. We do not last against our enemies, Sarah's voice echoed through the mental space. We outlast them, not through strength, but through the stubborn refusal to give up on the idea that things can be better. Vexthara's mental form was shaking now. I do not understand. You knew I would try to destroy you. Why did you come here? Because, Sarah said simply, someone had to try. The Queen's enhanced mind, overwhelmed by concepts it had never been designed to process, began to shut down. But as the mental link faded, Sarah heard Vexthara's voice one last time. Quiet and confused. What have you done to me? Sarah opened her eyes in the crystal chamber. She was back in her chair, the helmet heavy on her head. Across from her, Vexthara was slumped in her own chair, her forearms trembling. Slowly, The queen raised her head. Her black eyes met Sarah's, and for the first time since they had met, she looked uncertain. The trial, Vexthara whispered, is over. Sarah removed her helmet and stood up. Her legs felt shaky, but she was whole. Did I pass? She asked. Vexthara stared at her for a long moment. Then, very slowly, the alien queen smiled. Not the cruel smile of a predator, but something Sarah had never seen on her face before. Wonder. Human, the queen said softly, you have done something no one has ever done before. What's that? Vexthara stood up, her movements careful and deliberate. You have changed my mind. The crystal chamber was completely silent for several minutes after the mind meld ended. Sarah sat in her chair, watching Vexthara carefully. The alien queen had not moved since removing her helmet. She stared at her for hands, as if seeing. Then for the first time, finally, Vexthara looked up. Her black eyes were different now, softer somehow, like storm clouds that had finally released their rain. In 200 years of conquest, the queen said quietly, I have never experienced anything like what you just showed me. Sarah stood up slowly. Her body ached, and her head felt heavy from the mental connection. Your Majesty, are the trials. Complete Vexthara was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something that shocked Sarah completely. The mighty warrior queen of the Zephyrian Empire, conqueror of 47 worlds, slowly bent down on one knee. The trials are complete, she said. Her voice filled with something Sarah had never heard from her before, respect. And you have won. Sarah stepped forward quickly. Your Majesty, please stand up. There is no need for that. But Vexthara remained kneeling. There is every need. I challenged you believing that your species was weak. I was wrong. I attacked your mind thinking I would find cowardice. Instead, I found courage I cannot comprehend. The queen finally stood. But her movements were different now, less like a predator, more like someone who was seeing the world with new eyes. Tell me something, Sarah Chen, Vexthara said. When you volunteered for this mission, knowing you would probably die, what did your leaders say? Sarah smiled slightly. They tried to talk me out of it. They said it was too dangerous, that the risk was too great. And what did you tell them? I told them that someone had to try, that maybe, if we could understand each other, we could find a way to be allies instead of enemies. Vexthara walked to the crystal wall and placed one hand against its surface. For 200 years, I have solved every problem with force if another species resisted. I conquered them. If they were weak, I dominated them. If they challenged me, I destroyed them. She turned back to Sarah. But you faced my trials, and instead of trying to defeat me, you tried to understand me, even in the mind meld, when I was attacking. Your thoughts, you showed me compassion. Everyone deserves compassion, Sarah said simply. Do they? Vexthara's voice was thoughtful. Even someone who has conquered worlds? Even someone who has caused so much pain? Sarah looked at the alien. Queen really looked at her. Behind the fearsome appearance, behind the enhanced body and cybernetic implants, she saw something she had only glimpsed in the mind meld, loneliness. Especially someone who has caused pain, Sarah said gently, because they need to understand that there is another way. Vexthara was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. In the mind meld, you showed me memories of humans helping their enemies, saving those who had tried to harm them. I do not understand how this is possible. It is possible because we choose to make it possible, Sarah explained. Every day, every person makes a choice. They can choose fear, or they can choose hope. They can choose hatred, or they can choose understanding, and you choose understanding even when facing someone like me, especially when facing someone like you. Vexthara moved away from the wall and approached Sarah. For a moment, Sarah thought the queen might be angry, but when Vexthara reached her, she did something completely unexpected. She offered Sarah her hand, not a claw, not a weapon, just an open hand, palm up, in the universal gesture of peace. Sarah took it without hesitation. I have been wrong about many things, Vexthara said, but I have been most wrong about strength. I thought strength came from the ability to destroy. You have shown me that true strength comes from the ability to build, to heal, to hope. Your Majesty, Sarah said, I think your empire could benefit from learning about cooperation instead of conquest. My empire, Vexthara repeated slowly. Then she smiled, the first genuine smile Sarah had ever seen from her. Our empire, perhaps, if humans would be willing to share their knowledge with us. Sarah felt her heart leap. I mean, that the Zephyrian Empire formally requests an alliance with humanity, not as conqueror and conquered, but as equals, as partners. The Queen released Sarah's hand and walked to a control panel on the wall. She pressed several buttons, and suddenly the room filled with the voices of her advisors. Your Majesty, came a confused voice through the speakers. The trials are over? What is your decision about the humans? Vexthara looked at Sarah and smiled again. Send word to every world in our empire. From this day forward, humans are to be treated as honored allies. Any who harm them will answer to me personally. Excited voices filled the chamber as the alien advisors tried to understand what had happened. Vexthara turned off the communicator and faced Sarah. There's one more thing, the Queen said. She reached to her belt and removed something Sarah had not noticed before, a curved blade. That gleamed like starlight. This is the blade of understanding. It is given only to those who teach us something important about ourselves, she offered the blade to Sarah with both hands, for showing me that the greatest victories come not from defeating your enemies, but from helping them become better than they were. Sarah accepted the blade carefully. It was beautiful and surprisingly light. Your Majesty, I am honored. There is no need for such formality now, Vexthara said. We are allies, partners, perhaps even friends in time. Sarah smiled. I would like that very much. As they walked together toward the chamber's exit, Vexthara spoke again. I must ask you something. In your species' history, when someone conquers others through force, what usually happens to them? Eventually, they fall, Sarah answered honestly. Because ruling through fear can only last so long. People always find a way to fight back against oppression. And when someone leads through understanding and cooperation, they build something that lasts, something that grows stronger with time because people choose to support it. Vexthara nodded slowly. Then I have much to learn from your species. Will you help me teach my people this new way? I will, Sarah promised, but it will not be easy. Change never is. Nothing worthwhile ever is, the Queen agreed. But you have shown me that it is possible. If a human can face the warrior queen of the Zephyrian Empire and choose compassion over conquest, then perhaps there's hope for all of us. They reached the chamber's doors, which opened automatically. Beyond was a long corridor filled with alien guards and advisors, all waiting to hear the results of the final trial. Are you ready? Vexthara asked. Sarah straightened her shoulders and smiled. I am ready. Together, the human and the alien queen walked into the corridor to begin building a future that neither of their species had ever imagined possible. Behind them, the crystal chamber's walls pulsed gently with warm light, as if the room itself was pleased with what had taken place within its walls. Change had come to the Zephyrian Empire, and it had come through the simple power of understanding.